Alrighty, people. So, first of all, I think it would be a complete misnomer to talk about that thing that just occurred from the standpoint of who won or who lost. I mean, how do you even begin to answer that question? It wasn't even an event that's amenable to a verdict like that. So, I'm sure you'll see some punditry where they try to distill reactions into a win versus a loss for one or another candidate. I think that's just a bunch of chatter and nonsense and pontification. And that's generally been my view of commentary around presidential debates going back several cycles. But this one was slightly of a different sort. And I'm sorry, but watching this, how could anyone, if they're minimally sane, watch that and come away with confidence in the sustainability or viability of the American political system? Really? This is what we fielded to the broad mass of the country to choose between? Two guys who, let's face it, neither of them seem particularly adroit. You know, Biden is diffident and seems like he's off kilter sometimes, and he might not be exactly senile, but he's somewhere in that territory enough where it's not always clear what points he's trying to make, and expressing anything with anything approaching lucidity is a challenge for him. And then Trump is just a stream of consciousness ranter who apparently doesn't even have, I don't know, the self-control or the presence of mind to allow a discussion to take place, to not get into a big fight with the moderator. I don't even really want to discuss the precise details of this because it's almost irrelevant. I mean, it's the spectacle. I mean, to the extent that anything was significant about this at all, it was the overall spectacle of it, which is that what we have on full display is the product of a gerontocracy. I mean, this is a gerontocratic election, meaning it's this cadre of old folks squabbling amongst themselves, calling each other clowns and saying that, you're going to destroy the entire country if you get elected and things are rigged and you're the worst ever. And it just goes on. And it's just like, really, is this how you would expect the world's superpower if it was really moving ahead full steam, if we had all kinds of innovation in various sectors, if the political system was really responsive to the desires and attitudes of the populace? Is this what you'd expect everybody to be gathering around their TVs and computers to witness collectively? I mean, it's just a joke. It's really a joke. Now, I mean, I give Trump credit for having excellent comedic timing. That's his primary skill in life, it seems, or at least it's the skill that he's most honed over the course of being a TV entertainer. He knows how to drop in a well-crafted wisecrack. I chuckle like anybody else when I hear his colloquialisms and his ability to, do the insult comedy routine. But does anybody find that novel or interesting anymore? Really? I mean, again, I accept the comedic quality. I think it's ridiculous when people say, "Oh, if you acknowledge that Trump is funny, you're excusing fascism." Or if you find yourself laughing at some expertly tailored joke, you are a white supremacist or a Nazi. How dare you? You must disavow. Well, I mean, I think that's so ridiculously banal and almost self important. No, I mean, anybody can appreciate humor. The question is Trump's humor enough to buoy him now, or or has the novelty worn off? Right? Is what people are looking for still this routine that he's done day in day out for 5 years, more than 5 years? Um, I think that's questionable. But at the same time, Biden, I mean, it's look, I don't think he's senile. I think that's an exaggeration. Somebody who is senile can't stand up on a debate stage and at least string together a few sentences now and then. But he's not somebody who has the wherewithal to persuasively articulate a cogent vision for what the country is going to look like under his governance. And that's why he opens the door to attacks from Trump and others on the basis of him being a Trojan horse for the radical left. Like he's barely going to have any mental capacity when in office, and therefore these radical leftists are going to swoop in and control the government, which is also an exaggeration. I mean, Biden said something that I think was at least reasonable, which is when he said, "Look, the Democratic Party is me." And that's not literally true, but it is literally true that he won the Democratic Party nomination in a heavily contested primary race where it was never a given that he was going to win. And in fact, he was opposed by much of the party intelligentsia for most of the cycle. And then they did congregate around him at the last minute. But so I think to totally remove agency from him as if he has no influence whatsoever on the direction of the party is wrong. He does, just like Trump does as the head, so to say, of the Republican Party. But when you watch Biden's performance and you watch him, be kind of standoffish and not assertive, and then when he does decide to be assertive for a brief stretch of time, he fumbles a little bit. I mean, you can understand what he's saying, but it's not this forceful articulation of any kind of, well crafted message. Then you understand why those attacks, meaning the attacks along the lines of him having diminished cognition and he's just going to usher in this era of, I don't know, left-wing radicalism. You understand why those attacks have been seized upon. But I don't recall, maybe I should go back and watch the 2016 debates, although I don't really want to sit through them. I feel like I could probably do 1,000 things that are a better use of my time, like, I don't know, stare at the wall. But my recollection is that Trump did not really attack Hillary from the standpoint of that Hillary was this radical, was going to be a stooge for the radical left. And I've mentioned this over time, or I've mentioned variations at this point over time. And maybe this is worth writing an article about. Let me actually just jot that down. Give me one moment. See, this is what you get when you get this raw, hot, amateur live streaming. I want to make sure that I remember this. Okay. So in 2016, I don't recall Trump going after Hillary and saying, look, you are in league with radical leftists. You are going to bring them into the government. You're going to usher in socialism. In fact, what Trump often tended to do was he tried to create a wedge between Hillary and Bernie by giving roundabout praise to Bernie or caveated defenses of Bernie. Whereas now, I guess Trump is trying to tie Bernie to Trump or Bernie to Biden more explicitly, and through that characterize Biden as somebody who has been hoodwinked by the radical left. And I just don't know that the voters who swung things to Trump in 2020, meaning these lightly partisan committed or partisan voters who don't have a strong partisan commitment, who could flip from Obama to Trump, for example, in, I don't know, rural Maine or the Upper Peninsula of Michigan or something. I don't think that these heavily ideologized attacks, meaning the constant invocation of this threat of radical leftism, much resonates with them in the way that the attacks on Hillary resonated in 2016. Because, and I'm sorry if you've heard me repeat this in the past, but I think it's true, the attacks against Hillary from Trump were much more intelligible in 2016 because he could just say, rightly, with much justification, that Hillary was the embodiment of a corrupt, decrepit status quo that had enacted all these horrible trade deals, in which was in favor of interventionist wars that got the country nothing and squandered billions of dollars, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That was sort of a non-ideological, or at least an attack on Hillary that wasn't strictly defined by ideologized conceptions of who she was in terms of the left-right political spectrum. Whereas he's not really doing that with Biden to the same extent, or if he is doing it, it's not landing quite as well. He tried to bring up Hunter Biden and Burisma and stuff, but like, does anybody know what Burisma is? I mean, I'm not saying it's an illegitimate issue. It's worth looking into. But just screaming Burisma and you took money from the mayor of Moscow, I don't know. It's not as viscerally compelling an argument as was leveled at Hillary in 2016, I think. But then again, I don't think anybody's really watching this and thinking that they're going to get a persuasive argument for anything. It's a spectacle. It's theater. It's a manifestation of the convergence of the pathologies that are existent in the American political system. And look, I'm sorry if this makes you feel sad, or if you want to maintain a mode of cheery optimism. But I don't think that I really have to do much work going forward to explain my imperial decline thesis to people, which that I've been making in fits and starts over the course of these videos and some articles and so forth. I don't know that imperial decline isn't necessarily the right phrase, but what I've constantly returned to in trying to contextualize political events is that the United States is simply and unavoidably a declining hegemonic power The status as world superpower has been receding, and that has all kinds of second and third order effects that reverberate throughout the political system. And this debate, if you can call, I don't think you should call it a debate. I don't know what you should call it. We need to coin a new term. Whatever this thing was tonight is just the most stark, almost outlandishly so, manifestation of this longstanding trend of decline. And when I say imperial decline, I'm not therefore saying that there's going to be a civil war after the election. I don't think imperial decline necessarily is destined to culminate in some kind of maximally climactic, almost catastrophic event like an actual civil war or genuine nationwide civil strife. But it's clear that we've accelerated down that path through the personage of Trump, through the tactics and tendencies of his opposition over the past 4 years. And yeah, you know what? I think it is a lot overdone. People are so endlessly fixated on Trump's mannerisms and his habits of speech and his rhetorical orientation overall. But I'm sorry, to have a sitting president rant and rave about how the election is going to be. He doesn't even say it might be. He said it's going to be rigged and fixed, and it's a hoax. That is an indication of something. It means that the social compact that previously bound together politicians across the political spectrum has frayed. And when I say that, I've tried to exculpate Trump's enemies for committing acts that also have frayed the social compact, such as I think Trump reasonably pointed out, this ridiculous idea that the outgoing Obama administration and the media and such just happily allowed Trump to transition into power after the 2016 election. No, they didn't. They launched one of the most, if not the most, probably the most, almost actually certainly the most intrusive campaign of surveillance and subversion for an incoming administration that's ever been done, and under the phony auspices of Russian collusion or interference. So it's not like Trump just won the election and he just happily entered office with a seamless transition. No, they complicated and undermined that transition every step of the way. And it became a defining feature of his entire tenure in office. So I think that's perfectly correct to mention. So that's one manifestation of the fraying of this order that had previously enabled American politics to be somewhat coherent. And I'm not even saying that the more coherent or form of U.S. politics that predated 2016 was necessarily desirable or better. In a lot of ways, hid or just shrouded some of these pathologies and prevented them from coming to the fore. So in a way, maybe we're better off now that they're in the open, but still, that doesn't mean that you can deny the acceleration of this decline. And Trump ranting and raving about his certainty that the election will be rigged is one clear manifestation of that. And I'm not saying that there couldn't be fraud or election fraud or whatever. It's possible. I mean, there was a Republican won a congressional race in North Carolina in 2018 that had to be voided because people affiliated with him committed election fraud associated with absentee ballots. So it's clear that there is a potential. I mean, I think Democrats are stupid for denying outright that there's any possibility for election fraud when much of the country is converting almost overnight to a brand new election procedure. I mean, states like Oregon, Washington, Utah, and Colorado, and I think Hawaii. I mean, they converted to universal mail-in balloting over a series of cycles. It wasn't just decreed one night and then everybody got a mail-in ballot. And we have certain states where it's very questionable whether they have the infrastructure to count those ballots competently. So I think it's stupid to deny that, but it's also stupid to deny that Trump articulating his apprehensions about the legitimacy of the election in the manner that he does is reflective of something that's different about how political elites talk about the system. It simply is. And that is my takeaway. I mean, but the main takeaway is don't get bogged down in this pundit back and forth about who, quote, won or who, quote, lost the debate. The debates are not designed to proffer a winner or a loser. They're designed to fulfill a variety of other purposes, mainly in the way of entertainment. And I don't know how entertaining you found this, but in terms of raw informational value, as I mentioned on Twitter earlier tonight, I think you would have been, if they had just played 90 minutes of the teacher voice from Charlie Brown, like, it would have been of higher informational value than this debate. So under those circumstances, given the extraordinarily low informational value, to then extrapolate a, quote, winner or loser from that is insane. What I'm extrapolating is something that's a little more systemic. It's what does this say about U.S. politics aside, or in U.S. culture and the just system writ large, aside from the transient speculation as to who, quote, won. I mean, you're probably not going to see the polls move much. This election has been completely stable, polarized for months, if not years. Even pre-COVID, I said Trump had not, you can go check the record, Trump had not marshaled the ordinary advantages of presidential incumbency, and I felt that he was relatively unlikely to win re-election at that point. I think that's probably even more the case now, which is why I don't know what he's doing. But win or lose, still this debate will be put into the historical record as a very glaring manifestation of longer-term trends in terms of the decline of the U.S. as a hegemonic power. How are we going to manage that? It's not necessarily a death sentence. We have to figure out a way to navigate that, which would, you'd think, maybe entail some revisiting of foreign policy. Do we need to be overstretched throughout the entire world, ramping up now against China, overhauling the nuclear stockpile to deal with Russia? I mean, come on. In a way, there could be opportunities in the midst of this decline, but you also have to be honest about the reality of the decline and react and plan accordingly. But nobody's going to be honest about that because, even if Trump doesn't really believe it personally, which I don't think he does, He's still going to read the talking points fed to him by Republican speechwriters about the unalterable exceptionalism of America, which you'll notice when he's speaking off the cuff, he never mentions that stuff. It's just when his speechwriters, throw something onto his teleprompter, which he said he would never use a teleprompter, but of course he does constantly now. And he reads off those standard fare lines. And Biden says similar stuff about, in line with his theme of restoring the soul of America. I mean, restoring the soul of America is something that you could hear presidents and presidential candidates going back decades say in one form or another. There's nothing new whatsoever about it. And it's just another incarnation of this outmoded, increasingly obsolete exceptionalist ethos. Trump is the first post-exceptionalist president. I continue to maintain that. And I don't think you need any more evidence of that than this debate. There was nothing, quote, exceptional about this debate. Alrighty, people. I'm going to now view some of your super chats. Thank you for sending them along. As always, open up the which is my bad. Daniel Robinson sent a super chat and then retracted the message, or sent a chat where it said italicized message retracted, so I have to skip over that one. Western Goods says, I could not watch this. Thank you for recapping. You're welcome. And I think that appears to be it. I'm sorry if I missed your super chat. I will rectify that down the line. All right, everybody. I don't know what to say after that beyond what I've already said. Should we sing a song together? What shall we sing? I was thinking Stand By Me, just to give everybody a little bit of optimism. I mean, okay, one more quick point. I mean, the idea that they're going to get into a fight over mask wearing and Trump is going to insult Biden for wearing a mask too often. I mean, come on. I wear a mask every time I leave the house, if they're leave my apartment, if there are going to be people around. It should so be beyond any of this kind of food fight crap, but this is what we get. But again, it's another example of imperial decline, because they can't even forge a consensus on something as basic in terms of pandemic mitigation as mask wearing. And then the street theatrics of Proud Boys versus Antifa in Portland, that ends up being referenced in the debate, meaning these quote unquote LARPers who don't really have anything at stake in terms of their quote activism, other than putting on a show for social media and for themselves in this self-aggrandizing, very narcissistic fashion. Sure enough, that tactic is successful enough that you can get it into a debate now. So, I mean, there's a lot to parse out here. But reel back from the temptation to simply debate who, quote, won. Nobody won. Nobody lost. That's not the function of a debate. Step back, try to be a little more thoughtful about the meaning of what's transpiring before us, and use it to derive greater insight into the nature of society circa 2020. That's what I'll be doing, and that's what I will try to guide you in doing as we reach the month or so reach the point of a month or so till the election. I'll be back on the road talking to voters in short order. Keep you up to date on that. But for now, lay your weary head to rest, and we will speak again soon. Stay safe, stay cool.